The storm had been building all afternoon, and by the time Daniel reached the edge of his hometown, the sky was a sheet of dark gray. The wind pushed against his car, as if trying to turn him back. Rain splashed against the windshield in heavy waves, making the road ahead blur into shiny streaks of light. It had been months since he had visited, and part of him wondered if this storm was a sign. Still, he kept driving. The small coastal town looked almost abandoned in the downpour. The streetlights flickered weakly, and shop windows were shuttered against the wind. When Daniel turned down the narrow lane that led to his mother's house, a wave of warmth passed through him. No matter how long he had been away, this place had always felt like a safe harbor. He parked in the driveway and grabbed his overnight bag from the passenger seat. The familiar white cottage sat quietly at the end of the lane, its windows glowing softly against the storm. As he stepped onto the porch, the smell of wet earth and salt water filled the air. He knocked lightly, and before he could knock again, the door swung open. "Daniel!" Claire's voice was bright, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She pulled him into a hug that was warm and tight, yet quick, almost hurried. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said, grinning. "I missed you." "I missed you, too," she replied, closing the door quickly behind him. The wind rattled the windows as they stepped into the living room. The familiar scent of her cooking greeted him. Roasted chicken, fresh herbs, and something sweet, maybe apple pie. The house looked just as he remembered. Framed photos on the walls, books stacked neatly on the shelves, and the old clock ticking steadily above the fireplace. Claire guided him to the kitchen table, where dinner was already set. They sat down, and for a few minutes, it almost felt normal, like every other visit. But Daniel noticed little things that didn't fit. Claire's hands trembled slightly when she reached for her glass of water. Her eyes darted toward the window every few minutes, as if she was checking for something outside. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked gently. "Yes, of course," she said too quickly. "Just tired from work." She smiled again, but it was a thin, fragile smile. They began eating, but the clinking of silverware against plates seemed too loud against the storm outside. Daniel tried to fill the silence with stories from work, but Claire barely responded, nodding distractedly. She kept glancing at the window, her shoulders stiff whenever the wind howled or a branch scraped against the glass. The air between them felt heavier with every passing minute. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something she wasn't telling him. The storm outside was wild and unpredictable, but somehow the storm in his mother's eyes felt even more dangerous. The storm outside roared louder, making the windows rattle as Daniel finished his meal. He set down his fork and watched his mother carefully. Her hands, still trembling, gripped her glass as if she were holding on for strength. "Mom," he said softly, "are you sure everything's okay? You're acting different." Claire didn't answer right away. She stared at her plate for a long moment, her shoulders stiff. Then she suddenly pushed back her chair and stood. The chair legs scraped sharply against the floor. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to leave." Daniel blinked. "What?" "I just got here." She turned toward the window and yanked the curtains closed. Her movements were quick, almost frantic. "Please," she said again, louder this time. "You have to go right now." The room seemed to shrink around him. "Leave? Why? Did something happen?" "Don't ask questions," she said firmly, though her voice trembled. She grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and pressed it into his hands. "Just trust me." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, and it wasn't from the storm. The urgency in her tone was unlike anything he had heard from her before. She wasn't simply worried or upset. She was afraid. "Mom, you're scaring me," he said, trying to catch her gaze. But Claire avoided his eyes. "It's for your own safety," she whispered, her words almost lost under the sound of the wind outside. "Please, Daniel, just go." The storm howled again, but inside the quiet house, her fear was louder. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, tore between doing as she asked and stayed to find out what she was hiding. Daniel stepped outside into the storm, his coat clutched tightly around him. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking his hair and face within seconds. He walked toward his car, but his mind was spinning with questions. His mother's voice, urgent, almost desperate, echoed in his head. He opened the car door, but didn't get in. Something didn't feel right. Claire had never acted like this before. The storm wasn't enough to explain her fear. Daniel glanced back at the little white cottage. Through a small gap in the curtains, he saw the warm glow of the living room light. For a moment, the lights flickered, dimming, and then returning to full brightness. His stomach tightened. That's when he noticed a dark car parked farther down the street. Its engine was off, and its headlights were dark, but something about it felt wrong. It hadn't been there when he first arrived. Instead of starting his own car, Daniel closed the door quietly. He decided not to leave. Not yet. Moving carefully, he walked along the side of the house, staying close to the wall to avoid the harsh rain. His shoes splashed lightly in puddles, but the storm masked the sound of his steps. He crouched beneath the kitchen window and peered inside. Claire was pacing the living room, her hands wringing together nervously. She locked the front door, checked it twice, and then went to a drawer in the side table. She pulled out a stack of papers, glanced at them quickly, then shoved them back inside, as if she didn't want anyone to see. Daniel's heart thudded. This wasn't just his mother being overprotective. Something serious, something dangerous, was happening. A flash of lightning illuminated the street for a second, and Daniel thought he saw movement near the dark car. He ducked lower beneath the window, his pulse racing. Whatever was going on, Daniel knew one thing. He couldn't just leave her. He needed answers, and he needed to make sure she was safe. Daniel waited outside in the pouring rain for another minute, his breath misting in the cold air. Lightning lit up the street, and thunder rolled overhead like a warning. He couldn't leave. Not now. Moving quietly, he crept to the back of the house. He knew the side door near the kitchen was always unlocked when his mother was home. The doorknob turned easily beneath his hand. He slipped inside, careful not to let the door creak too loudly. The familiar smell of his mother's cooking mixed with the sharp scent of wet clothes as Daniel stepped onto the kitchen floor. The storm outside masked the soft sound of the door closing behind him. He took a slow breath, then walked toward the living room. Claire stood near the fireplace, her back to him. She was tossing small pieces of paper into the flames, watching as they curled, blackened, and disappeared. Her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shaky sigh. "Mom," Daniel said quietly. Claire spun around, her eyes wide with shock. "Daniel, what are you doing here? I told you to leave." "I couldn't," he said firmly, stepping closer. "You're clearly in trouble. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening." Claire closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her strength. When she opened them again, they were filled with worry. She looked toward the window before speaking. "Daniel, I didn't want you to know. I thought if I kept you out of it, you'd stay safe." She walked over to the side table and pulled out the stack of papers he had seen earlier. "These are evidence, documents, and records. For months, I've been helping the authorities investigate a smuggling ring operating out of the harbor." Daniel's mouth went dry. "Smuggling? Here? Why you?" "I work at the shipping office," Claire said, her voice trembling. "I started noticing strange shipments and missing paperwork. I couldn't ignore it. When I reached out to the police, a federal agent asked me to keep gathering proof quietly." She swallowed hard. "But a few weeks ago, I got a warning. Someone knows I've been talking. They said if I didn't stop, they'd make me regret it." Daniel's chest tightened. "That's why you wanted me gone. You thought they'd hurt me." Claire nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "They're watching. That dark car outside. It's been there on and off all week. I thought tonight was the night they'd make their move. If you weren't here, they'd have no reason to touch you." Daniel felt anger and fear swirl inside him. "Mom, you can't face this alone. You should have called for help." "I was going to give everything to the agent tomorrow," she said quietly. "But I didn't expect him to act so soon." A gust of wind shook the windows, and the sound of rain intensified. Claire turned toward the fireplace, where the last scraps of paper crumbled into ash. Daniel stepped forward, gently taking her hand. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, we face it together." Claire hesitated, then gave his hand a small squeeze. For the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed slightly, but the fear in her eyes remained. The storm outside continued to rage, as if warning them that the night's danger was only just beginning. Daniel held his mother's hand, feeling how cold and unsteady it was. "You should have told me sooner," he said softly. "We could have gone to the police together, or even left town." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "If you got involved, they'd use you against me. I couldn't let that happen." She looked at him with a mixture of love and regret. "Ever since your father died, keeping you safe has been the only thing that matters to me." She paused, her voice breaking. "I thought pushing you away tonight would protect you. I thought if you left, they wouldn't follow you. But when you knocked on that door, I realized how fragile my plan was. I was terrified they'd hurt you just to send me a message." Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. He had never seen his mother so vulnerable. He squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore, Mom. I'm not leaving you. Not tonight. Not ever." Claire's lips trembled as she whispered, "I was so afraid, Daniel. But hearing you say that, it gives me strength I didn't know I had." For a moment, even the storm outside seemed to quiet. A sudden, heavy knock at the front door shattered the quiet moment between them. The sound echoed to the small house, louder than the thunder outside. Both Daniel and Claire froze, their eyes locking in silent fear. The knock came again, harder this time, rattling the door on its hinges. Claire's face went pale. Without a word, she pulled a small USB drive from her pocket and slipped it behind a framed family photo on the shelf. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped it. "Someone's here," she whispered urgently. "Daniel, you need to leave to the back door right now." Daniel's chest tightened. "No, I'm not leaving you alone with whoever that is." The knock turned into a slow, deliberate pounding, then silence. Claire grabbed his arm, her voice trembling. "Please, if they catch you here, they'll know you're part of this. I can handle it." But Daniel shook his head firmly. "We're in this together." Outside, the sound of footsteps moved off the porch and around the side of the house. Rainwater dripped steadily from the roof, and the wind whistled through the trees like a warning. The danger was no longer distant. It was at their door. The front door creaked open, a faint groan lost beneath the roar of the storm. A cold draft swept through the hallway. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Claire grabbed her coat, whispering, "This way, quickly." She led him toward the side door near the kitchen. They slipped outside into the rain, their shoes splashing through puddles. The storm's howling wind masked their hurried steps as they ran toward Daniel's car. Behind them, a faint beam of light from a flashlight cut through the darkness, searching. Daniel yanked open the car door, and Claire dove into the passenger seat. As the engine roared to life, headlights flared down the street, the same dark car he had seen earlier. "They're following us." Claire gasped. Daniel gripped the wheel. "Hold on." The tires screeched as he sped away, the wipers slashing back and forth across the windshield. The dark car stayed close, its headlights glaring in the rearview mirror. Daniel took sharp turns through winding roads, using every shortcut he remembered from his childhood. Finally, after a tense chase, the headlights vanished behind a hill. The storm raged on, but for the moment, they were free. Daniel drove for miles until the lights of the town disappeared behind them. Finally, he pulled into a small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering weakly in the rain. Inside, the warm air wrapped around them like a blanket. They slid into a corner booth, their clothes soaked and their breaths unsteady. Claire's hands trembled as she gripped a steaming cup of coffee. Daniel took out his phone, but paused. "Who can we trust?" he asked. Claire pulled a small card from her coat pocket. "There's a federal agent I've been working with," she whispered. "He'll know what to do." An hour later, headlights swept across the diner's windows. A plain black sedan parked outside, and a man in a dark suit stepped out, his badge glinting faintly under the flickering neon sign. Claire exhaled in relief. The federal agent she had trusted had arrived. He greeted them with a calm, steady voice and slid into their booth. After hearing Claire's quick explanation, he nodded and took the USB drive she had hidden behind the photo frame. "This is exactly what we need to bring the smuggling ring down," he assured them. but you both need to stay under protection tonight. Claire's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. I just wanted to keep Daniel safe, she said quietly. Daniel reached for her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to protect me alone anymore, he said gently. We're stronger together. The agent promised to contact them once the evidence was secured and left to make arrangements. As they prepared to leave, the rain eased into a light drizzle. The storm wasn't completely gone, but it no longer felt threatening. Claire and Daniel stepped outside side by side, a fragile sense of safety and hope warming them against the cool night air. As Daniel and Claire stepped out of the diner, the storm clouds began to break apart, letting thin silver moonlight touch the wet road. The air smelled fresh, clean, as if the night itself had taken a deep breath. Daniel glanced at his mother walking beside him, her hand gripping his tightly. In that moment, he understood the depth of her fear and the strength of her love. She told me to leave, but her reason didn't just leave me speechless. It showed me that courage can be quiet, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is protect the ones they love.